Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really glad you're here. If you enjoy fun content and cool videos, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let's jump right in.
The Beach Boys harmonized their intent to have good vibrations as their music filled the inside of Owen's Jeep. His finger rested casually on the radio dial and his palm on the gear shifter. It had been an unpleasant night. Tears stained his cheeks. Their size matched the size of the raindrops that hammered his window. But that was Owen. Everything he did was big. Big tears, big gestures, big muscles. If he had a motto, that would be it. He loved hard and fell harder. The lights from his Jeep reflected off the rain-drenched pavement. The yellow lines seemed to jump up at him as he passed over each. He always drove down the center of the road, aka playing Pac-Man when it was dark like this. There were limited streetlights around the park, part of a national movement to limit light pollution in federally funded areas. Owen was all for whatever kept the park from becoming the Vegas version of a park. He didn't want brand-name stores in the town. He didn't want trailers the size of houses filling up the campground. He just wanted nature to be enjoyed in the way it was intended to be, which is to say with a cup of coffee, a tent, and a beautiful woman next to him. The backpack on the seat next to Owen trembled at the rumble of the Jeep. Owen glanced over to it and placed his hand on it. He could still feel the little box under the fabric. Another fresh round of tears broke free from his eyes. He wiped at them as he passed a road sign that stated Brightness Falls. The town site for the park was only 10 kilometers away. He loved the town. It was the only one he could ever see himself living in. The quintessential mountain town. He'd been lucky enough to get a job in the park as a ranger. When they'd opened the park back up, after that whole incident with the rider, and every day since he'd been living his best life, they were paying him to hike, swim, yell at idiots, and take care of this magical place. If he could have sex with the park, he would have. Which, to be fair, felt like he was on his way to do. Every morning he'd get up, make coffee, drive to another part of the park to enjoy the sunrise. Then he'd break out his phone and record another episode of his podcast, Good Vibrations, pairing morning sunrises with Beach Boy songs. The gist of the show was that he described where he was. The sunrise, his coffee, and finally what Beach Boy's song went best with it all. It was wildly unpopular, but he did it for himself. And if the world wasn't as sophisticated as himself, then they could sail on. Caroline was supposed to join him today. It was episode 100. She was going to be his first official guest on the show. But that wasn't going to happen now. Not after last night. Their fight had been such a huge blowout, he'd ended up staying out at the ranger outpost overnight. The mosquitoes were very thankful for it. Owen's back wasn't. The cots at the outpost were garbage, and not built for a man of his size. They never tell you that once you start exercising, your shoulders are going to be too big for just about everything. The number of door frames he bumped into now was embarrassing. But despite the constant battle with door frames and all the other narrow-built stuff in the world, it was well worth it. He'd been born skinny, and he'd been that for most of his life. It drove him crazy, mainly the whole never being able to talk about it without fears of people not understanding. You're allowed to say you need to lose weight in society, but you can't say you need to gain some. It's a massive trigger that makes all sorts of people give you dirty looks. You'd think you just told them you were into giving squirrels outhouse handjobs or something. The rain increased its onslaught on the vehicle's window. Droplets the size of Owen's nipples hammered the glass. He clicked the wipers on. The two long blades cut through the rain with lethal water force, leaving a clear view to see for only a second before they completed their journey back to where they started. The Beach Boys harmonized their intent to have good vibrations. As their music filled the inside of Owen's Jeep, his finger rested casually on the radio dial and his palm on the gear shifter. Owen shook his head. Were they playing the same song twice in a row? That was odd, but what do you expect from an all Beach Boys satellite radio channel? Another fresh round of tears broke free from Owen's eyes. He wiped at them as he passed a road sign that stated Brightness. Falls, the town site for the park, was only still 10 kilometers away. What? Owen muttered to himself. The local kids must have been farting around with the park signs again. They'd done it as well for the town's annual festival, Brightfest, when it had been on. They'd changed the sign from Brightfest to Girthfest. Most people laughed it off, though a few as always were upset that the B was missing. They didn't think their tax dollars should have to pay to buy a new letter. Owen had been in the prior group. He'd been the first to post it on his podcast's social media pages. He'd gotten a lot of likes. Who knew people liked girth? He'd suspected it for years, but he'd never received that large of a confirmation. Still, monkeying with a festival sign was one thing. Changing a distance marker that was outside the town site, well, that was a federal fine. He'd have to scare them straight with his best ranger voice. Owen grabbed his walkie from his backpack, double-checked the power and channel, then squeezed the talk button. "Hey, Beck, you up yet?" Nothing but a static buzz greeted him. Beck. Again, nothing but static. That was odd. She was always up before him. It was her job to make sure that all the animals being tracked by the park rangers were nowhere near the town or popular visiting location within the park. It never ended well when a bear or moose got too close to a group of tourists. The tourists seemed to lose their common sense when it came to dangerous animals. The bear, on the other hand, just wanted to eat. And a stupid tourist was a delicious snack. So, Beck made sure to keep the two groups apart. She liked to get up early to do so. "Beck, you there?" Owen said as he tried one last time. A strange static echoed through the walkie. Owen turned the radio volume up and held the walkie up to his ear. The sound reminded him of what the dial-up internet at his parents' house used to sound like. Lots of strange clicks and squelches. The Beach Boys harmonized their intent to have good vibrations. As their music filled the inside of Owen's Jeep, his finger rested casually on the radio dial. In his palm on the gear shifter, the walkie was gone. Owen shook his head. What the hell? Another round of tears on Owen's face. He stared at the Brightness Falls sign as it passed by. Still only 10 kilometers away, Owen slammed on the brakes and glanced behind him at the sign. One sign change was one thing, but there weren't that many signs between the ranger station and the town. The farting kids would have had to add signs to change. He wasn't sure they had that kind of dedication to a prank. But what was with the music? Why did the radio keep going back to the same song? Plus, it wasn't even on a few seconds ago. Then there was the walkie that seemed to have vanished from his hand. Owen patted his backpack. He could feel the radio, along with the little box inside. So, how had it gone from his hand to his backpack? Owen reached into the bag for his cell phone as he turned back around. The Beach Boys harmonized and filled the inside of Owen's Jeep. His finger rested on the radio dial and his palm on the gear shifter. Tears ran down Owen's face. He was moving again, despite having just stopped to look at the back of the sign, the very sign that was just passing him by again, stating the town was only 10 kilometers away. What the Kokomo? Owen muttered as he smashed the radio power button with his fist and drove his foot down hard on the brake. The Beach Boys harmonized. Owen's finger rested on the radio dial and his palm on the gear shifter. Tears on his face. The 10 kilometers away sign passed by again, as if it was giving him the finger. Well, this was just great. Was he in some kind of Groundhog's Day loop thing? At least that's what it seemed like. But why had he sometimes restarted it quicker than others? Apparently turning the radio off was a big no-no. Rain pelted the window. Instinctively, Owen turned the wipers on. The Beach Boys harmonized. Owen's finger rested on the radio dial and his palm on the shifter. Tears on his face. There was that 10-kilometer sign again. Okay, so no wipers. This time, when the rain got harder, he left the wipers off, despite how hard it was to see. He squinted to look through the massive drops. Okay, so far so good. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The sign was fading into the background. Owen laughed. Take that, you stupid fucking groundhog time looping sign. He flicked the sign, the middle finger, and laughed again. The Beach Boys harmonized. Owen's finger rested on the radio dial and his palm on the shifter. Tears on his face, and there was that stupid fucking groundhog time looping sign. Again, he left the wipers off when the rain started and watched the sign fade into the distance behind him. Now what had been done to cause the loop to restart last time? Giving the sign the finger? Who knew signs could be so sensitive? So, what should he do? He really hated all this paranormal stuff, but Beck. She loved this garbage. He grabbed the walkie and remembered he'd just tried calling her and got nothing but those weird sounds. So she wasn't going to be much help. This all felt way out of his comfort zone. He liked the Beach Boys. Lifting heavy things and then putting them down, neither seemed applicable to whatever was happening to him. A thunderous crack echoed through the Jeep cab over the sound of the rain pelting the roof. Owen tried to see between raindrops what it was. It wasn't a sound that was local to the park. He'd never heard it before. It sounded like something massive snapping in two. Shit. Owen whispered as he watched a commercial airplane plummeting to the ground. It streaked across the front window of his Jeep. The plane's engines blazed red, obviously on fire. Definitely not normal. He couldn't even remember the last time he saw a plane fly over the park. He was pretty sure it was a no-fly zone anyway, since the whole Brightness Falls incident. He watched as the airplane pulverized itself into the side of a mountain not far from town. A trail of fire followed it up. The forest around the crash site smoked. Shit, even with rain like this, a fire that size was going to spread easily through the forest. It had been years since they had the money to remove all the underbrush and kindling. The government had felt forest firefighting wasn't worth the investment, but that tax breaks for corporate CEOs was. As Owen watched the fire spread down the mountain, his anger grew, and he really wished that he could punch a couple of dozen politicians in the face. There was a blur through these raindrops as something ran from the tree line to the road. Distracted by the plane crash and fire, Owen reacted slowly. As a moose met the front of Owen's Jeep, its height sent the poor animal careening over the top of the vehicle. Blood from the unfortunate creature mixed with the rainwater. Owen badly wanted to turn the wipers on, but the Beach Boys harmonized. Owen's finger rested on the radio dial and his palm on the shifter. Tears on his face, the moose's blood was gone, but the sign was back. He grabbed his radio. He had to let someone know about the plane crash that was about to happen. Maybe he could stop it. He pressed the walkie button and was greeted by the strange noise. Sweet surfing safari? Owen yelled as he rolled his window down, though before he could throw the walkie out, the Beach Boys harmonized. His finger rested on the radio dial, palm on the shifter. And there was the sign. He wanted to punch every inch of the inside of his Jeep. Then get out and punch everything on the outside too. He closed his eyes and took a slow, deep breath. He wondered what Caroline was doing. He wasn't sure how many loops he'd been through so far, but it felt like forever since he'd seen her. And while he was still pissed off about the night before, he still loved her. Crisis and time loops tended to remind you of the important things in life. Owen opened his eyes as the sign passed by again. So the moose. What was he supposed to do about the moose hitting the Jeep? Was he supposed to do something or not do something? He ignored the rain as he thought about it. He was actually getting used to driving through the big drops. After passing by the sign at least 30 more times, he'd lost count after the first 23. His frustration was reaching Hulk levels. If he could shred his pants and grow 20 sizes larger, he'd gladly do so. At least that would be a cathartic release. This was, well, it was hell. His own personal Owen hell. No Caroline, a forest fire, plane crash, murdered moose, broken radio, missed podcasting opportunity. The recurring song was killing his love of one of his favorite Beach Boys songs. And worst of all, he felt like a complete idiot for not being able to figure any of this out. He knew he wasn't book smart, but now he was wondering if maybe his mom had been humoring him about being special. He was pretty sure a brick sitting here on the gas pedal could do a better job than he could. He'd tried opening his window to various heights, slowing down, shifting gears, turning the AC on and off, and a few dozen more he couldn't even remember now. The worst part of it was that even if he got past the moose, then what? He'd have to figure out another thing. He'd have to start this whole process over. The more he thought about it, the more shocked he was that he'd made it this far. Frustrated. And taking a page from the Bricks book, Owen hammered on the gas. What if he killed himself? Drove his Jeep right into a tree? Would that do anything? The Jeep passed 88 miles per hour. Maybe he could. The moose bounded over the road in the Jeep's rearview mirror. Owen threw his hands in the air. "Yes? Take that, you stupid inanimate object." Owen yelled at the sign as it vanished from his rearview mirror. He'd done it. He'd gotten past the moose and out of the loop. Except, shit. The Beach Boys harmonized. Owen's finger rested on the radio dial and his palm on the shifter. Tears on his face, the sign like a giant middle finger, passed by the Jeep. It was a nice pool, in-ground, concrete, and very well maintained. It was just in the middle of nowhere. It was on state park ground, surrounded by trees. The entire thing was very nicely done with a chain-link fence all around it to discourage after-hours shenanigans. It's just the thing was in the middle of a forest. I have no idea what the planners were thinking. But it's free, and the kids love it, so I guess who cares if it's in the middle of a forest, right? That's what I used to think. I took the kids one day and forgot to bring a book to read, so I was bored. There's only so long you can stare at kids splashing around in the pool. I don't know how the lifeguards do it. I guess that's why they take turns every hour or so. With boredom, my only companion, and absolutely nothing else to do but bake in the roasting sun. I decided to talk to the lifeguard who was on duty. I asked if she'd ever seen anything odd or unusual here at the pool. She took her eyes off the kids for just a moment to size me up. "Are you sure you really want to hear?" she said, turning her attention back to the swimmers. "Sure," I said. "Because once you hear, you won't be back," she said. I hesitated for a moment, then chuckled to myself, sizing her up. She was a thin girl that looked like she might just be out of high school or maybe a year or two into college. I imagined there was some story of a party gone wrong or some kid that nearly drowned. In the back of my mind was the thought, what if she's playing me? I decided I was bored enough not to care. So I nodded. Double quotes. "Yes, I'm sure," I said. She leaned closer so that only I could hear the story she told. All the while, watching the kids and never making eye contact with me. This was the story she told. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I've been a lifeguard here for 3 years during the summer to help pay my college bills. Since a lot of lifeguards come and go, it was easy to get to number 1 in seniority. I was the only one who was full-time and had some benefits, like insurance. Everyone else was part-time and came and went quite often. Lately, we've been having trouble keeping people. We've had to cut some of the pool hours. I couldn't be here 7 days a week, although my boss seemed to think I could at first. I thought our dwindling workforce was due to the current worker shortage going on across the country. Why work here when you can find something better? But as time went on, I began to find out why they were really quitting this easy job. I always got to the pool first and did a walk around to make sure there was nothing broken. I picked up trash and generally made sure the pool is ready for guests. After that, I opened the lifeguard shack and tested the levels in the pool. One day I arrived a little earlier than usual, and to my great surprise, I found wet footprints leading from the pool to the fence. The pool stays uncovered at night, and it's possible for someone to sneak in. However, in the 3 years I had worked here, no one ever had. As odd as this seemed, what was ever odder was the size of the prints. They were huge. I pulled out my phone and took some pictures before they dried out, and even took a shot of my foot next to the wet footprint. It was nearly twice the size of my foot. Now I'm no basketball player. My foot is only a size 8 in women's, but still, twice my foot size didn't seem normal to me. In fact, this whole thing didn't seem normal. Why break into a pool to go swimming when the pool would be open in less than an hour? I shrugged it off and went about my daily routine. I opened the pool, and the people came in. No fuss, no MUSS. At the end of the day, I got another surprise. When I went to clean the filter, it was full of hair. Now don't get me wrong, there are usually some odd things in the filter, and hair is not the oddest. I once found an eyeball floating in the filter. It was from a kid's stuffed animal, but still, it was pretty freaky to see it there. This hair seemed different. There's always hair in the filter, but this was longer and thicker. It was almost as if someone let a dog swim in the pool. Again, I shrugged it off and cleaned the filter. But I logged it in the back of my mind. The next day, the same thing happened. I made sure to get there a little early, and there were the wet footprints again. It was as if I had scared someone off by arriving early. But how would they get their dog over the fence? It was 8 feet tall. Was someone sneaking their pet orangutan in to go swimming before ours? Was a bear somehow getting in and taking a dip? The hair I found didn't seem right for a bear. I searched all around the fence, looking for any spots where something had dug under and gotten in. There was nothing. I double-checked all the gates. They were secure, and there were no spots where anything could get in. Again, when I cleaned the filter, there were more hairs. I kept some out of curiosity. On my next day off, I drove to the college I attended and asked the professor if he could analyze the hair as a favor. He reluctantly agreed and told me it might be a few days. In the meantime, I was getting to work earlier every day. This mystery consumed me. I had to find out what was going on. It's not only for the cleanliness of the swimmers, but for my own sanity, no matter when I arrived. Whatever it was seemed to know I was coming and got out just in time. I decided to change my strategy. I drove to work early, but parked my car at a trailhead a mile away from the pool. It took me around 20 minutes to walk to the pool. I approached as quietly as possible. As I reached the rise where I could see the top of the fence, I could hear splashing. I kept coming until I could see the level of the water at first. I didn't see anything. Then suddenly something exploded out of the water. It was massive and covered in long brown hair. It landed back in the water with a huge splash. I froze. I knew there was something, but until now, the reality hadn't hit home yet. There was a creature swimming in the same pool I watched every day. I stood there, transfixed on this apparition, as it frolicked in the water like a kid. It spouted water out of its mouth 20 feet in the air as it floated on its back. My mind kicked out of frozen. It's terror mode, just enough for me to pull out my cell phone and take a picture. Unfortunately, I'd forgotten to turn the volume down. When it made the lens click sound, the creature immediately snapped its attention to me. It glared at me for a long moment, causing my veins to turn to ice. I expected it to run away, startled, but it didn't. It slowly rose out of the water and stepped onto the concrete surrounding the pool. I know it stood at least as tall as the fence as it stepped toward me. I was too terrified to snap. Another picture as it hurdled the fence in one leap and landed 40 feet in front of me. I had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The relative safety of my car was a mile away. It might as well have been 100 miles. I knew there was no way I could outrun this thing. It flexed its claws as it continued its slow advance toward me. Fangs bared. I knew I was about to die. It closed to 10 feet away. I could hear its breathing and smell the chlorine. It's mixed with wet animal smell as the water dripping from its fur, and then it paused. It cocked its head, then gave me a look, and disappeared into the forest. A few seconds later, a car drove by. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and started the long trek back to my car. Every step I took, I wondered if it was following me. Every sound I heard caused me to whip around and look to see if the monster was sneaking up behind me. It seemed to take forever to reach my car, and after the last quarter mile. I didn't think I knew it was following me. When I dove into my car, I locked the door and called my boss. I told him I needed to take the day off. He said he didn't have anyone to cover for me. If I took off, the pool would have to stay closed until my relief came in 4 hours. I fought a hard battle between my fears and my responsibilities. I reluctantly drove to the pool and opened it. Everything I normally did, all of my daily routine took on an element of a horror movie. Every blind corner, I felt like I was about to be attacked. Every time I was out in the open, I could feel eyes on me. When people came, I felt a little better having company. But as I scanned the swimmers to make sure they were safe, I would constantly scan the trees for this monster to see if I was safe. I wondered if it would attack even with the swimmers there. My mind wandered to the movie Jaws. All the swimmers in the ocean were blissfully ignorant that they were about to be a meal for a malevolent creature. I wondered if my swimmers were about to share the same fate. When my shift finally, mercifully ended, I felt like I had been put through the ringer. As I drove home, my attention was divided between the road and the image of that monster slowly approaching me, claws out. Snarling, I didn't even see the truck that blindsided me. I woke, the hospital with machines beeping and tubes running in and out of me. The doctor told me how lucky I was, that my injuries weren't that bad, and I should be out of the hospital in a few days. I called the professor and asked him what he had found out about the hairs. He seemed hesitant and told me he would rather tell me in person. A few hours later, he visited me in my hospital room. He said that he couldn't match the hairs with any known animal, but when he contacted some lesser-known sources, they came up with an answer. I didn't really want to have my suspicions confirmed, but I needed to know for sure. He said it could be a Bigfoot eye. I pulled out my phone and showed him my picture of the creature. He took it and studied it. He zoomed up and scanned through the image. Like a kid that had found $100, he asked if I could send him a copy of it. When I agreed, he was so excited I thought he would jump into my hospital bed and kiss me. Knowing what was hunting me didn't make it any better. In fact, now I knew no one would believe me. The professor even said I should be careful who I tell. After he left, I called my boss. He never asked me how I was, only when I could get back to work. When I told him I quit, he nearly blew a gasket. He screamed at me that it was my fault he had to close the pool, and informed me that if I quit, the insurance wouldn't pay for my hospital stay. So, I was trapped. I had to go back to the pool of terror and possibly face that thing. I had no desire to ever go back, but I had no choice, so back I went. 2 days after I was released from the hospital, I was due for my first shift of opening the pool. I made sure I didn't go early. I knew this thing existed, and I had no intention of trying to sneak up on it again. I was ready to live and let live. Unfortunately, it had other plans. I saw it more often, peeking out from behind trees, watching me as I watched the swimmers. When I closed the pool and walked back to my car is when I could especially feel its eyes on me. I practically ran to my car, slammed the door, and got out of there as fast as I could. I made sure my attention was focused on the road, even though my eyes kept darting to the sides of the road. The following day, I came to work a few minutes early and stopped at the ranger station on the way in. I told them what was happening, and they laughed me out of the building. The professor had told me to expect it, but it was still hard seeing people I'd talked to and had grown to trust turn their back on me like that. I saw the creature. Again, that day in the trees glaring at me, but did my best to ignore it. When I got home, I was mentally and physically exhausted. My stress level was through the roof. I'd started taking pills to help me sleep because this thing was in my dreams as well. That evening, as I tried to relax, heard a commotion outside. I stepped out to find my trash cans knocked over, not an uncommon occurrence since I live on the outskirts of town. But this time when I went out to pick them up, it was there. It stood there much the same as the first day I discovered it. Snarling and flexing its claws, I stood there, mind froze in fear, wondering at this dreadful apparition that stood before me. When it took its first step toward me, my fight-or-flight mode kicked in. I ran inside and locked the door. Then I called the police and told them someone was trying to break into my house. The monster helped corroborate my story by breaking a window while I was on the phone. I ran upstairs and hid in my bedroom closet for a long time. There was a dreadful silence. What was it doing? Was it toying with me? And then I heard it. I could hear its massive footsteps as a dull thud on my carpet. I heard it slowly searching for me. It went all through the downstairs, and then I heard footsteps coming upstairs. I could hear them slowly, methodically working their way toward my bedroom. They came into my room. I could hear them walk around my bed and then over to the closet door. For a long moment, it did nothing. Just stood there. I could hear my breathing turn rapid. I could feel the sweat run down my cheeks. I could picture the end of my life in bloody, gory detail. The door swung open, and I screamed. "Ma'am." "It's all right," I heard. I opened my eyes to see the police officer standing in front of me. I blinked hard to make sure he was real, then threw myself into his arms. He held me for a moment, then pulled me away. "Are you all right?" he asked. I couldn't answer. My mouth wouldn't work. It took me a few minutes to be able to form a few words. "Is it gone?" I didn't see anyone, and I searched the whole house. I nodded automatically, not really hearing what he was saying. He said the only thing they could do was patrol the area more often. He left shortly after, leaving me to my terrified self. There was no way I'd be sleeping anytime soon. I stayed up all night watching movies. Mostly comedies, anything but horror. When the time rolled around for me to go to work, I wasn't up to it. I called the boss and told him I was sick, but he wasn't having it. He demanded I come to work anyway. I got an extra large coffee on the way to work that day, wondering how. I was going to stay alert enough to watch for swimmers. When I got there, the answer was already provided for me. As I started my daily routine, eyes darting to the trees, I saw there was something floating in the pool. It took every ounce of courage I had not to run to my car and never return. I slowly approached it and saw it was a deer, at least what was left of one. Its throat had been slashed and blood hovered in the water around its body. What was even more disturbing was there was a drawing on the concrete. I approached and looked at the drawing. I immediately covered my mouth and backed away. It was a star with a circle around it, and it was drawn using the deer's blood. I snapped a picture with my phone and sent it to my boss. He replied, "Very funny." I told him it wasn't a joke. I took pictures of the deer in the water and sent him those as well. He accused me of doing it so I wouldn't have to work that day. I shrugged it off, nearly telling him who, or should I say what, was responsible. He told me to wait where I was and not to open the pool. I put out the closed sign out and covered up the pentagram with a tarp. When people started showing up to swim, I apologized and told them we were closed for repairs. A few asked me what repairs, and I told them it was a filter problem and should be cleared up soon. When the boss arrived, he was beyond livid. He walked around looking at the deer and the blood in total disbelief. He screamed at me that the pool would have to be completely drained and cleaned. He threatened to make me pay for it. I told him I had nothing to do with it, and if he tried to blame me, I would call the police and press charges for harassment. That seemed to settle him down a little. He told me to try to get the blood off the concrete while he started the process of draining the pool. Scrubbing did next to nothing. I found an old pressure washer that we used to clean the buildings and tried it. That seemed to work and please the boss that he wouldn't have to pay to have it sandblasted all this time. Kept an eye on the woods. Looking for my hairy stalker, at times I caught glimpses of him as I cleaned up the mess. I know he had left. I wondered at the ramifications of him killing the deer and making the symbol. I wondered if he knew what he was doing. After a long day of cleaning and listening to the boss griping, I finally got into my car, exhausted, as I drove home. Saw the monster on the side of the road. I was tempted to run it over, but didn't think my car would survive it. As I was about to pass him, I saw him holding a deer by its neck and legs. To my horror, he threw the deer at my car. Time slowed as I had no time to react. Instead of hitting the brakes, my foot slipped off the brake pedal and hit the gas. It turned out to be a good accident. The deer hit the back of my car instead of the front. I truly believe he was aiming at my windshield. I didn't dare stop. I kept driving. Only once I got home did I check the damage. There was quite a dent in the rear of my car behind the passenger door, but it was still drivable. I believe if I had hit the brakes, it would have totaled my car or gone right through the windshield and killed me. I shuddered at the thought of this monster actively trying to kill me. I wondered what I had done to deserve death in the eyes of this creature. I thought back to the first time I saw the footprints. I replayed everything that had happened. It struck me that he had seen me take pictures of him, and that seemed to anger him. I thought of a radical idea. It was stupid, and I didn't think it would work, but it was something to try rather than having this monster stalking me the rest of my life. I drove out to the pool early the next morning. It was strange seeing it empty. I don't think I've ever seen the bottom of the pool so clean. I stood on the concrete beside the pool and held up my phone. The picture I had taken of the creature was on the screen. I saw it come out of the woods and leap the fence. It's landing right in front of me. I tried not to show how very frightened I really was. He looked at me, then at the phone. I took it as a good sign that his fangs weren't bared. I set the phone on the ground and backed away. He reached down and picked it up, looking at the picture for a long moment, then turned and leaped over the fence, disappearing into the woods. Wow, that was some story, I said. You should write fiction." That was great. You want to know the best part? She said, never taking her eyes off my kids swimming in the pool. Sure. She leaned a little closer and whispered, "It's true." I smiled and rolled my eyes. "Sure it is," I said. "I'll tell you what," she said. "Why don't you look over my right shoulder into the tree line and tell me what you see?" I did as she asked, grinning at the joke this lifeguard was playing on me when suddenly my smile faltered. I saw something in the trees. It was a brown head peeking around a tree. At first, I thought it was a coworker in on the joke, but the head was over 8 feet tall. Its eyes bored into mine and narrowed. I found myself looking away, despite myself. When I looked back, it was gone. "Something wrong?" She said, "H. How long ago was the pool reopened?" I said, "Last week." I looked. Around and over in the corner on the concrete I could see the faintest outline of a star. My eyes grew wide. "Welcome to my world," she said without the slightest hint of humor, whipped around toward the pool. "Come on, kids." "We're leaving," I called out. "Ah, Dad. We haven't even been here an hour. Why do we have to go?" I looked at the lifeguard and then glanced up into the trees. "It's not safe," I said. I loaded up the car with 3 disgruntled kids and started home. On the way, I kept glancing into the woods. I swear I saw the woods glance back. My girlfriend and I are seasoned hikers. We've tackled everything from rugged mountain trails to swampy, mosquito-infested paths, and we've always made it out unscathed. But this time was different. This time, the trail almost didn't let us go. It started with a warning. I know that sounds over the top, but ... it's true. The guy at the ranger station, a wiry, middle-aged man with a leathery face, looked up from his clipboard as we signed in. "You two sticking to the main trail." He sounded like he must have smoked 4 packs a day for the last decade, planning on taking the loop trail up to the summit. I replied, "We've been looking into it for a while and we think the weather's right for it this weekend. We've never been through Baroque Park before, but we've heard it's beautiful." My girlfriend curled her arm through mine and rested her cheek on my shoulder. "It's going to be great. I think he might have something special planned for us." I didn't. My smile turned nervous. The ranger hesitated, his pen hovering over the paper. Could he tell I didn't have a ring? Was he about to out me? No. He braced a hand on the counter and leaned forward, eyes serious beneath bushy eyebrows. "Stick to the marked paths. And if you hear anything strange like a kid crying, you keep walking. Don't stop. Don't look. Just keep going." "What?" My girlfriend gave a nervous laugh. "Don't want you to get lost." The ranger's eyes didn't waver. "People go looking for what they shouldn't, and not all of them come back. We decided it was just some backwoods superstition to spook tourists. What else could it be?" So after we brushed off the nerves, we shouldered our packs and started up the trail. The first few hours were uneventful, just the 2 of us surrounded by towering pines. It's a crunch of dirt and leaves underfoot and the occasional bird call. If you've ever been on a hike before, well, there you go. Standard day. My girlfriend kept looking over at me, eyes gone to honey. I didn't know why she thought this was a special proposal trip. It wasn't until we parked I even realized that's where her expectations were set. And my attention? Yeah. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do to cushion the blow when we hit summit. Then we heard a child's voice. It was crying. We stopped dead in our tracks. Amber froze, her eyes wide. "Do you hear that?" I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. It sounded like a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. "Help me," she was calling out, her voice breaking with sobs. "Please help me. Mommy? Daddy?" Her voice grew quiet with fear. "Anyone? Hello? Are you okay?" I called, my voice bouncing off the trees. The crying stopped. For a moment, the forest was silent, too silent. No wind, no birds, nothing. Then the crying started again, louder this time. Closer. "We need to check it out," Amber said, already stepping off the trail. She waved her arms to the side to keep her balance as she made her way down the incline. Every instinct, I had screamed at me to stop her. The ranger said, "Screw what the ranger said," she snapped. "If it was your kid out there, wouldn't you want someone to help?" She had a point. Against my better judgment, I followed her down the incline and into the trees. The crying led us deeper into the woods. "Help me. Someone. Please," she sounded frantic. ... But the further we went, the more I noticed something was off. The voice wasn't changing direction. Normally, if someone's lost, their voice shifts as they move or turn their head. But this sound, it was static, like it was coming from a fixed point. The ranger's warning came back to mind. My steps started to slow down. "Amber, I think we should go back. Something's not right. I can't find you. Please, I'm scared." The kid was sobbing now. "Stop acting like a jerk," Amber snapped. "She's got to be right ahead of us." Amber was right. 20 more feet, and we saw her. She was sitting on a fallen log, her back to us, wearing a dirty pink jacket and clutching her knees to her chest. "Hey, sweetie," Amber called gently, stepping closer. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The girl didn't answer. She just kept crying, her shoulders shaking with each sob. "Please help me. ... Amber crouched down, reaching out to touch her shoulder. "Wait," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Something about this felt wrong. Why was she just sitting there? When Amber had called for her, why? Hadn't she tried to find us? "Amber, we should just go get the ranger." "Come on," the girl's crying stopped. In one smooth, jerky motion, she turned to face us. Her eyes weren't right. They were too large, too dark, reflecting the light like an animal's. "You found me." Her mouth stretched wide into a grin that split her face unnaturally, revealing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. "I knew you would. I knew if I called for you, you would find me." Then her entire skin began to split down the middle, like a zipper. I don't know what I was expecting to see underneath, but it wasn't this. It wasn't the sinewy, looking creature that crawled out of its human shell like a spider shedding its exoskeleton. Amber screamed, stumbling backward. I grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet, shouting, "Run," so loudly it made my throat sting. We bolted, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at our faces. Behind us, I heard the creature give a low, guttural growl, followed by the unmistakable sound of something running dash fast. It was chasing us. We hit the incline. Then the trail end didn't stop running until we burst back into the ranger station, gasping for air. The ranger looked up from his desk, his face grim. "You heard it, didn't you?" We nodded, too shaken to speak. He sighed, getting up and locking the door. "You're lucky you ran." Most people don't. He didn't ask what he meant. We didn't want to know. We've hiked dozens of trails since that day, but we've never gone back to that forest. And if we ever hear crying in the woods again, we'll keep walking. I had been working at the Graywood National Park for 10 years. I loved my job and the serenity that the park offered. The sound of birds whispering and chirping about their day filled my head as I watched the sun rise over the mountains and turn the pink clouds into a brilliant orange. Also, I knew every inch of the park like the back of my hand as a park ranger. I've seen and heard a lot of strange things over the years. Some of them are hard to explain, and others are downright spooky. But it's all part of the job, and I've learned to take it in stride. One of the strangest stories I've heard happened a few years ago. A group of hikers had gone missing in the woods, and we launched a massive search and rescue operation. We combed the forest for days, but we couldn't find any trace of them. It was like they had vanished into thin air. Then, a week later, one of the hikers stumbled out of the woods. He was disoriented and confused, and he kept muttering about how the forest had swallowed them up. I took him to the hospital, and he eventually recovered. But he never spoke about what had happened in the woods. Another odd occurrence happened when a group of campers reported seeing strange lights in the sky. They described them as bright orbs that seemed to move in a pattern. We investigated, but we couldn't find any evidence of a UFO or anything like that. But the campers were so convinced that they had seen something otherworldly that they refused to stay in the park any longer. However, There was one area that I always avoided, the Whispering Woods. A dense and dark part of the forest where people claimed to hear strange whispers at night. It was a patch of forest where the trees grew close together and tangled branches blocked out most of the light from the moon. The canopy was so thick that it housed a complete layer of epiphytes, plants that grow in trees but never touch the ground. In some places, hanging vines stretched from tree to tree and gave a glimpse through the treetops. It's like ropes holding an invisible net up high. I hated to think about what might be lurking in the dark there. Some said it was ghosts, whispering, while others said it was the restless spirits of trees that had been felled in a great storm many years ago. Whatever the case, I never went near it. One day I was on my routine patrol in the drizzly, foggy forest. The musty scent of old leaves and damp soil leaked into the air as I brushed past the nameless trees. A low droning grew louder, and I spotted a silhouette through the mist. It took me several moments to adjust my vision and make out that it was an elk. Suddenly I came across a group of terrified hikers. They were huddled together. Their faces were pale, and their eyes wide with fear. They were trembling and clutching at each other, their bodies tense and braced as if expecting an attack. Their clothes were disheveled and streaked with dirt and sweat, and their breathing was shallow and rapid. They claimed that they had ventured into the Whispering Woods and had heard eerie voices urging them to go deeper into the forest. The hikers had barely made it out, and their pale faces were enough for me to take their claims seriously. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. We heard these strange voices in the woods, and we don't know what to do," he said, his voice quivering with fear. I nodded, trying to calm them down. "Can you tell me more about the voices you heard?" Another hiker, a woman with short, curly hair, spoke up. "They were like whispers, but they were so clear, and they seemed to be coming from all around us. We couldn't understand what they were saying, but it was like they were urging us to go deeper into the woods." I frowned, taking mental notes. "Did you see anything unusual in the forest?" The hikers shook their heads in unison. "No, nothing. But the trees seemed to be closing in on us, and we felt like we were being watched," said another hiker, a young man with a backpack. "I scanned the area. Looking for any signs of danger?" "Right. Just follow the path and leave the woods for now," I said, and the group did so as the sun began to set. I decided to investigate the woods and put an end to this mystery. I ventured into the forest with a flashlight and walkie-talkie in hand. The sun's light peeked through the canopy of trees, barely touching the ground and leaving everything in a deep shade. The shadows stretched out like tendrils, reaching into the distance. Mist loomed in the air, making the trees seem bigger and more imposing. The wind picked up, howling softly and rustling the leaves of the trees as if beckoning me forward. A strange stillness hung in the air, as if something hidden waited in the shadows. In the distance, I heard faint whispers, barely audible on the wind. As I was getting deeper, the air became colder, and I tried to ignore the chill that ran down my spine. Then I stopped in the middle of a small clearing and started to listen. The place was bathed in a deep and eerie darkness, the moonlight filtering in through the canopy of trees. The shadows of the trees stretched out like tendrils, reaching deep into the darkness. The mist loomed in the air, making the trees seem bigger and more imposing. The ground was damp and muddy, littered with pine needles and fallen branches. A hush crept through the night air, interrupted only by the soft chirping of crickets and the occasional croak of a frog. The breeze rustled through the leaves of the surrounding trees, and an owl hooted in the distance. Then I started hearing them. But they did not come from the forest. They were in my head. They were low, almost inaudible, yet highly unsettling. It's as if 1,000 tiny voices were speaking at once, but all at once. Every syllable was whispered in an otherworldly tongue, full of unknown sounds and unfamiliar syllables. It felt like a cacophony of unearthly sounds that reverberated through my mind. Then I could make out a sentence. "Go away." As I stood there, the ominous tone of the words sent an immediate shiver down my spine. It felt like someone or something was warning me of an impending danger, and my mind quickly processed the potential risks of staying in the area any longer. Without a moment's hesitation, I turned on my heels and ran away, out from the forest. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, fueling my quick escape as every step felt like a matter of life or death. I could sense the presence of an unseen danger lurking in the shadows, and my heart raced with every passing moment. The dense underbrush and tangled branches seemed to conspire against me, but I pushed on, fighting my way through the obstacles in my path. My breathing became ragged, and my heart beat faster and louder as I ran for my life. Finally, I emerged from the forest, gasping for breath, and I realized that my whole body was trembling with fear. The warning had been too intense to ignore, and I was grateful that I had heeded it. I took a moment to collect myself and to calm my racing thoughts, trying to make sense of what had just happened in the depths of the foreboding forest. What the hell was it? I muttered to myself in the comforting safety of my car while driving home 20 miles away. When I returned home, no matter how hard I tried, the memory of the foreboding whispers still lingered in my mind. Those voices were enough to keep me awake late into the night, my thoughts filled with dread and confusion as to what had happened in the forest. I decided to research the area in an effort to uncover the source of the mysterious whispers. I scoured historic records and digital newspaper clippings, hoping to find some evidence of what could have been lurking in that forest. What I found were only reports of people hearing the whispers. Also, I did find news articles with evidence of disappearances and strange sightings, but I was not sure if they were relevant or not. The thing is, those reports were from different parts of the forest each year. I was looking for a pattern, but there was nothing that could explain what had caused those whispers. Although I didn't discover any conclusive explanation for the phenomenon I heard in the forest that night, I could say with certainty that there was something strange lurking beneath its surface. I did not understand it yet. The next day I was so scared that I called in sick to work. I needed a rest, to put myself together and process the events of the previous night. I looked out of the window. The sky was a deep shade of gray, with heavy clouds that blotted out the sun and concealed any hint of blue in their shadows. Rain poured down in sheets, puddles forming in low-lying areas and overflowing into the streets. The world outside was blurry and distorted, an endless landscape of gray and mist. The rain tapped heavily outside like a symphony of drums, creating a mesmerizing rhythm. The windows were blurred with droplets, creating a static soundtrack from the raindrops hitting the glass. The wind whipped through the trees and the thunder rumbled like waves crashing against the shore, and the lightning flashed briefly like an explosion of light. I reclined on my couch and listened to the raindrops, but a few minutes later I turned on the television. Soon, a report about a forest came up as the news of the day. Huge rocks, trees, and debris were strewn across the land. The force of the landslide had upturned the entire terrain, leaving a mangled mess that stretched for miles. Heavy boulders have come crashing down from the mountain, and there is destruction everywhere. Huge cracks had formed in the ground, and deep ravines had been created as far as the eye could see. Pools of muddy water reflected the dull sky, and a thick haze hung in the air. Then I realized it was the forest where I had been working for years. The forest was completely destroyed by a landslide. Good morning. We begin this morning with a breaking news story. A massive landslide has struck Graywood National Park, causing extensive damage and destruction, the reporter said. People were walking around, carrying equipment and searching for survivors. The landslide occurred early this morning, and it has completely destroyed the park. There are no reported fatalities at this time, but many people are missing. The cause of the landslide is currently unknown, but officials say that recent heavy rainfall may have played a role. The park was a popular destination for hikers, nature enthusiasts, and tourists. It is estimated that millions of dollars in damage have been done to the park's infrastructure and facilities. This is a tragedy. The national park forest was a place of natural beauty, and now it's gone. I can't believe it, a local resident said to the reporter. Recovery efforts are underway, and emergency services are on the scene. However, the park is expected to remain closed for an indefinite period. Our thoughts are with those who have been affected by this disaster. The reporter finished his news report. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and my jaw hung open in disbelief. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The whispers were not meant to cause harm. They had been trying to warn us all this time. The forest seemed to know its death was coming. I was out on a routine job patrolling a remote area of the park when I saw it. The small but unmistakable opening of a cave. Since it wasn't on any of the maps and it was my job to check things like that out, I wasted no time in taking out my flashlight and heading towards the smaller, a manageable cave opening that was wide enough for me to step through without having to crouch down. The cave was situated in a clearing close to a pond. The opening was located right in the middle of a wall of sandstone and was fairly unremarkable looking. No sign that it was dangerous or out of the ordinary, since the opening was barely wide. Enough for several people to step through. That meant the cave had never been turned into a mine. There was also no garbage lying around or any other traces of recent human activity. So for all I knew, I was the first human being to set foot in this cave in who knows how long. The feeling came with a sense of exhilaration I'd never felt before. So I took a deep breath, switched on my extra-strength flashlight, and steadily started walking inside. My first few steps in the cave were beyond cautious. Aside from the fact I'd never been here before, the terrain was very steep. You could feel it slowly descending further into the earth. Since I didn't want to lose my footing and go tumbling down, I kept casting the flashlight beam around. Because despite the intense, glaring light it provided, the darkness in the cave was unlike anything I had ever seen before. I'd been in the forest at night many times, but this far exceeded that. This darkness was dense. After enough careful steps, the descent became smoother and the floor leveled out. The cave floor itself was rough in some spots and smooth in others. You could tell where the elements had weathered away parts of the land and made a smoother path to walk. The temperature had also dropped significantly down here, and I could now see the many impressive stalactites and stalagmites dotting the cave. The rough descent had been replaced by a fairly even path straight forward, but there wasn't a ton of space to walk around here. A small group of people could squeeze through, but no more than that. My boots occasionally crunched on gravel, but apart from that, the cave floor was empty, almost uncannily clean. Seeing how untouched the cave was, it can't help but make you feel like an insignificant speck in the vast scheme of the universe. The cave was not only far older than I was, it would be here long after I was gone, especially because the cave seemed endless. The more I explored, the more I got the sense that I was making no progress at all. A look at my watch told me I'd been down there for about an hour when the narrow path opened into a massive chamber, and the sight made me gasp. The entire space was filled with water, and the walkway served as a makeshift bridge to the other side. The walls were rough-hewn and jagged virtually everywhere you looked. There had been plenty of impressive stalactites in the cave, but the ones dangling from the ceiling here were massive. So precise and sharp-looking it seemed impossible that they had occurred naturally. Some of them were practically touching the water that filled the space. I had no idea how deep the water was, but in the thick darkness, it looked unnervingly deep. The walkway that went from one side of the cavern to the other got rougher here, but it still looked as steady and weathered as before. So, being more careful of where I stepped than ever, I slowly began to cross the cavern. I was almost halfway across when I heard the sound of a rock hit a cavern wall and splash into the water. The sound in the empty space seemed so uncannily loud I almost jumped. Once I was sure of my footing, I carefully shined the flashlight around to check. There was nothing, no signs that anything at all had happened. But on this job, you learn that just because everything looks fine doesn't mean nothing is going on. The hair standing up on the back of my neck told me everything I needed to know. I didn't dare take another step forward. If anything, I was slowly adjusting my footing to turn back around. I was just about to go back the way I came when I heard it. The sound of whispered voices. At first I had no idea what it was. I hadn't heard a single sound before now, aside from my own footsteps. Ignoring the chill slowly washing over me, I slowly began to walk back across the cavern. I'm not sure if it was just my imagination, but as I did, the whispering got louder. The creepiest part was how the voice seemed faintly familiar. It's not enough so I recognized it, but enough that it was unsettling. The worst part was that I had absolutely no idea where the voice was coming from. The acoustics of the cave made it seem like the voice was both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I was almost completely across the cavern when I cast my flashlight around and saw it. There, on the left side of the cavern in the middle of the dark water, was a shadow. With my heart pounding in my chest and the grip on my flashlight slick, from sweat, I carefully turned and aimed the beam directly at it. The water illuminated was a murky gray, but the shape was as dark as it had been without the flashlight. I had no idea what the shape was. It was completely solid, but it wasn't any sort of animal, and it didn't look remotely human. It just hung there, floating just below the surface. If there had been the slightest suggestion of human activity here, I'd say it was garbage, a blanket, or some clothing that fell in the water, but I knew that wasn't the case. The sight made my stomach clench, but then, with my flashlight still aimed right at it, it disappeared. There was no movement or any disturbance in the water, just vanished. That was my cue to leave. Once I was safely across the cavern and on solid ground, I ran out of there as fast as I could do to the numerous rock formations I had to maneuver around. It seemed to take an eternity. I periodically checked behind me to make sure there was nothing there, and while there never was, I could never shake the feeling that something was watching me. After what seemed like a painfully long time, I finally arrived back at the cave opening. Then came the difficult task of maneuvering what was essentially an uphill climb. By now, I was drenched in sweat, and the climb did nothing to help that. But taking care with where and when I stepped, I eventually was standing at the mouth of the cave with daylight coming through. I gratefully walked out into the sunshine and looked down into the cave. As I did, I swear I saw a figure walk past on the cave floor below. When I looked back, it was gone. Once I caught my breath, I radioed the cave discovery into the station, and some other rangers came out to check it out. One of them was my boss, Jack. I told them I didn't see anything, but one look at me and my demeanor told them something was up. Jack was no stranger to the unusual things park rangers can and do encounter on the job. So with him and the other, two rangers listening, I told them what I saw and experienced down in the cave. When I was done, Jack sat there quietly for a moment. Doesn't matter if it's 2022 or 1822, things still go bump in the night, he said in his deep, steady voice. I don't disagree, I muttered. I'm sure you don't, Wade. I won't pretend I saw what you saw, but I believe you saw what you saw. Nature can be, and often is, a very scary place. No kidding. One of the other rangers agreed. There's a reason this cave looked so untouched by people. No sign of animals either. None. Jack shook his head at that. That's the sign something is off. Animals don't go near something. That means people shouldn't either. So we'll mark this cave as dangerous, go back to base, and log the find. Now let's get out of here.